the idea that you articulate, Danny, about being a Jew or what Judaism means. You write at some point that the complexity of evil and the fallibility of the good have been with me all my life and are perhaps the first things I think about when I think about being a Jew. Could you give more color to that idea? And what other things, what are the second things? Tell me more about what you think about when you think about being a Jew. L'chaim to you and l'chaim to everyone. You can have some of these bits now, and then we could...
well, I grew up in France, and I'm 87 years old, so I was in France during the war as a child. And my experience of being a Jew is really largely the experience of being a Jewish child in France during the war. But there were several aspects of it that being Jewish was always associated with complexities. That is, on the one hand, for my mother, she was very proud of being a Jew. And, Jews are smarter than other people and are better in many ways, but she was also very embarrassed to be a Jew. And for her, not looking Jewish was a real compliment. And so there was that complexity. There was, and which really affected me, there was certainly a sense that Jews are attuned to the complexity of the world. And so that certainly was true from the beginning. And now that's not specifically Jewish, but my mother was very much a Jew. She was born in Lithuania and spoke French, with a distinct accent, although she was in many ways quite Frenchified. But she was a gossip, and that had a big effect on me, because the gossip was always interesting. That is, it wasn't merely, who is sleeping with whom. I mean, it was about the complexity of relations between people and the complexity of people and the mix of good and bad in people and the cleverness and stupidity going together. And I was exposed to that from very early in my life. And I think that had a big effect. I mean, obviously I was predisposed for it, but, and that's associated in my mind with the complexity is associated with Jewishness. I could go on, but
no. So and just there's a very popular book called the Bible, so I've been looking through your works. Are there any parts of it that you have read or that talk to you or that you think connect to psychological ideas that you've studied that you think, hey, that story works or is interesting to you? Or is there a least favorite part or book or Jews always have a least favorite part, but maybe both sides of it?
I don't. I mean, I was in Israel in high school, and so of course I studied, and I even spent a year in a religious school early on. And when we came from France, we had our family was religious. My uncle, by the way, is a famous rabbi, was a famous rabbi in Israel. So of course I know a fair amount about the Bible, but it hasn't been very important in my life. It was a subject to be studied, but I would say, no, it's not the most important thing that I've read.
In the yeshiva system, there is this idea of a chavruta. In fact, the Talmud makes the statement, o chavruta o mituta. Either you have a study partner or you have death. You can't study without a partner. And there's even these massive debates among the yeshivot, which I'm sure this is of great interest to everybody, whether you should sit side by side to your study partner or face to face. And they quote verses to be able to, each one to show their position. If you go around the world, different yeshivot, they have different ways of sitting, and they feel that this is the better way. So you had your chavruta, and there's a book written about it. Do you think that one of the ways, or a great way of overcoming bias in our thinking, is by having this cognitive or this chavruta in life and chavruta in study, and like almost an intellectual soulmate And maybe if the answer is that this is critical, how does one go about trying to find their intellectual soulmate?
Well, I have been extraordinarily fortunate. Just about everything I've done has been collaborative, and most important things, most of the more important parts of my work have been collaborative. And all of them have been intensely social. But as my collaborators have been friends, including one of the more interesting collaborations I had, not the most intense, but it was with somebody who deeply disagreed with me. And we spent, and we deliberately, I invited him to collaborate and to explore what we agree on and what we disagree on. And we ended up being friends. And so, yeah, collaboration has been the essence of my life, and the source of most of my successes really has been my choice of friends. So, but you know, a lot of it has been done walking, actually, not sitting in either position.
Okay, yeah. But do you think that that's something everybody should be seeking in their life?
Oh, I mean, you know, it's been, if you're, I can't speak for every profession, but if you are if you're an academic, and in most fields that would be true, I think. Uh, Collaboration is a joy. I mean, it's a joy, and in the best of cases, and I had that experience a few times in my life. Uh, you the joint mind is so far superior to each separate mind that you know, it's like being smarter than you are. It's like being enhanced. And I've had that experience, and it's a wonderful experience. I can only wish it on people. As to correcting biases, I think the answer isn't so favorable or positive. There is a fair amount of research that shows that on many problems, groups not only do not correct biases, but they amplify biases. So what happens is, and that depends on the nature of the problem. If it's a problem that has a recognizable solution, like the bat and ball, that once you know it's 5 cents, you understand that it must be 5 cents. When there are problems that have that character, then the group is good, because once somebody offers the correct solution, there's a more probability, the higher probability of finding the solution when there is a group than each individual on his or her own. And when the solution is proposed, it's recognized as such. But in many other problems, there is no obvious solutions. And then when people tend to agree on their biases, and 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 their confidence is increased by the fact that other people agree with them. So it is not always good on. There's been a lot of work on it, and it's a very interesting topic to think about. What are the topics on which a group will be better than an individual, a team, and how do you arrange it? And actually, well, last month I finished a book with two collaborators, and that's one of the topics that we discussed, is how to arrange a group so as to exploit the disagreements that we call noise between the individuals to arrive at a solution that is better than the average rather than worse.
A sneak preview?
Uh, a sneak preview, gladly. The book is called Noise, and it's coming out on May 18th, both in the US and in the UK. Um, and it is about the fact that when people make judgments, and by judgment I mean they reach conclusions that cannot be just computed, so that there is no guarantee of agreement. When we say it's a matter of judgment about anything, we presume that there is going to be some disagreement, but we also presume that there is better and worse, and that it's better for disagreement to be constrained rather than wide. And so our book is about noise, which exists where it shouldn't exist. It exists when physicians look at cases, when judges pass judgments, when underwriters evaluate premiums, and even when experts find matches in fingerprints. So there is noise in every profession. And a one-sentence summary is that wherever there is judgment, there is noise, and more of it than you think. So that's the sneak preview.
Thank you. But the judgment that we generally have is important, though, right? Meaning one wouldn't be able to survive without.
Oh, of course. I mean, from many of the problems in life do not have a computable solution.
Right.
So you have to exercise judgment. You have to take the information in and integrate it as best you can. And it turns out that people are noisy in two senses. They disagree with each other more than you might expect, and they disagree with themselves in the sense that depending on your state of mind when you encounter a problem, a judgment problem, you're likely to reach different conclusions. And how to control that and how to exploit it are
You need to
raises
buy
a
the
lot of
book.
it.
For that, you need the book.
Well, you may complete a book without really having a solution to that problem, but a lot of it actually does involve. A lot of the book is how should groups how should organizations do their thinking when the members of the organization are noisy? That is, how do you improve the judgment that are made on behalf of the organization, like the underwriters making decisions for the firm, judges representing the judicial system, the justice system. And so we investigate what we call system noise and how to deal with it.
I feel on some level today, there's almost a reversal of this, where in the areas where people should be utilizing judgment, they don't. And people that they shouldn't, and times that they shouldn't, they are. I mean, does that ring true?
Well, I think you're probably referring to social media, or am I?
Sure. Actually, not. I wasn't initially, but let's go there.
What were you
No,
referring
I was
to?
saying in general, meaning certain, like I said, like in order for basic survival, you have to make certain judgments. For example, the words that people say, it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, judge everybody favorably. But it doesn't say anywhere, don't judge. And I kind of like that idea. The people who say, nowadays, what people say is don't judge. And I always feel like, first of all, it's impossible and it's setting you up to failure. And what's it trying to do to your brain anyway? Like, so those are, that's kind of what I mean.
Oh, okay. I feel, I'm not sure, by the way, that people are more judgmental today than they used to be. I think the opposite. Okay. There is more tolerance, and everything goes in many ways, and so there is less in the sense of judging, a passing judgment, which is different from making a judgment. Passing judgment,
okay,
I think what you were talking about,
okay.
And that I'm not sure there is more of this than there was earlier. My guess is there is much less of it. Right. That we're much more tolerant of people being different from us and than our parents were.
Okay. Perhaps just to take a step back, it's something that's always interested me, and I don't know if there's an answer, so I'm kind of just throwing it at you, which is your life's work was driven by your interest in certain areas, and you've done some work to try and understand why perhaps you're interested in that. So I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts of what makes people interested in the particular things that they're interested in? And how do we know, or what's a good way of discovering what our true interests are? I'm still uncertain about my life path, so I'm really trying to...
I don't think I'm going to have an answer for
No, no,
you. It's, my, I, in my, I have an answer about myself. I think I've been interested in how people think, since I was a boy. And I discovered that I was a psychologist actually as a teenager, I think. When I discovered that when I thought about ethical problem, or when I thought about God, I was less interested in whether or not God exists than I was interested in why people believe that God exists. And when I was thinking about what's good and bad, I was more interested in indignation than in ethics. And so I was thinking as a psychologist that.
that's very interesting. Before the talk, I wrote to Dan Ariely to ask him. I said, I'm having a talk with Danny Kahneman. What should I ask? So I have to do the honor of at least addressing the questions that he said. He said he wrote to me, what makes you optimistic about the future of humanity?
Oh, he knows me. He knows that nothing makes me optimistic about the future of humanity. So that
That's
clearly
it.
is the answer that he was expecting. I'm temperamentally a pessimist, and my mother was a pessimist, and that clearly, there is
a strong Jewish tradition.
it's not only a tradition. Actually, there is genetics behind it. I mean,
Okay.
optimism is a genetically transmitted. Very clearly, and it's very good to be an optimist, but I'm not lucky that way.
Okay.
So Dan probably knows it.
As he signed off all his emails, irrationally yours. And the second question he asks is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh.
I think he's hoping the answer is to be quoted a lot by him. But
it's odd actually, because I expect my academic work, what I've written, what I've done, it will last a while and it will be overwritten. I mean, it's not every academic, certainly in the social sciences, should expect his or her work to sort of vanish from consciousness within one generation or two or three. So legacies are short-lived. And I'm not very concerned with that. I have been very interested in what's the next thing that's going to happen, that is in the fields where my ideas have become establishment and other things that many people believe now. I'm really curious to know. I know they'll be displaced, but what will displace them? I would really love to know, and I don't. And when you are asking, but something positive did occur to me when you ask about my legacy. And that's one thing that I have done that is unusual, I think. And that's the notion of adversarial collaboration. And in the sense, it's not caught on, but I wish it had. And this is that when academics disagree, they shouldn't have controversies. I mean, they should have a discussion, and they should publish their discussion, or they should try to resolve their differences or to articulate their differences. And that is fairly original and unusual, and people haven't adopted it, but I wish they had. So that's what I would wish my legacy to be.
I think that it is, I understand that as time develops and as new ideas come, what you're saying is generally true, but I think it would be fair to say of your work that it's become part of the consciousness of most people or businesses, or so as opposed to an idea, that a new one comes. I think it would be based off, unless there's new research that completely undoes everything. But
I think it's true. Thinking fast and slow has had substantial impact, and our work was recognized and influential before that. But that will pass. And it's not, this is not when I don't want to compare myself to Freud because there is no comparison, but uh, but he was utterly dominant when I was a young person. He was really in people's consciousness, and you thought in those terms, and the extent to which Freud has disappeared from consciousness, we're aware of the name, we're aware of the, people vaguely know what he was about, but as a way of approaching the world and as a source of ideas for thinking about the world is gone, and that happens to everybody, I think.
Okay, I think that's fair. I just, his final question, which is, and I think now that I understand his knowledge of you as not an optimist, but a pessimist, he said, has being a scientist made you happier in life overall?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's been, as I said, I've been very lucky, and I've been lucky in multiple ways. So I believe that, success is luck mostly anyway, but I have been lucky, as I said, in my choice of friends, but it also turns out that I've been lucky in my choice of a topic and of an approach to the topic. So we had a topic that lent itself to what happens to you in your family. That is, we could study thinking by posing riddles to people, and memorable riddles that a 7-year-old could ask an adult and see sort of the adult making an error. And that helped our work sort of penetrate across discipline boundaries and so on. And so our work has been clearly more influential than most other works in psychology. We are a big part of psychological intellectual export. But the reason is just this, actually, is that we studied riddles, and riddles are of general interest. So that was completely lucky. So the level of influence and prominence that the work has acquired is largely because of the choice of the topic, which is thinking, and the choice of the medium, which is riddles. And neither of these is deep or profound, but that is really that's luck. And I've been very happy in my work, largely because of the collaborations. I mean, the book that I just finished, I finished with two collaborators. I worked with two collaborators. I could not have written it alone. And one of my collaborators was a brilliant Frenchman, and we were very lucky. I mean, in the sense that COVID for us turned out to be a blessing. And it turned out to be a blessing because we used to travel to each other. He would come from Paris to New York. I would travel. It was all very nice, but not all that productive. We Zoomed for an entire year, 1 or 2 hours a day. And that was both very productive and complete and a real joy. And I'm not desolate without it. I'm still on Zoom with a fair amount, but the collaboration has been with the happiness.
So beautiful. It says in the Talmud also, it says that Hakol tole b'mazal, everything depends on luck. And then it adds, there's like an additional quote that says, Afilu sefer Torah shebeheichal, even the Torah that's in the Ark also depends on luck. It has luckier periods in history and not so luckier periods in history. Which experiment surprised you or shocked you the most? How people responded to it, or the outcomes or the findings of it?
Well, we had a most famous riddle is actually not the bat and ball is not mine, by the way. It was created by a postdoc of mine when he and I were working together, and he is Shane Frederick is his name. But of the problems that Amos Tversky, my major colleague, and I created, there is a problem that's called the Linda problem, and that's our most famous example. And it goes something like that. Linda is now 35 years old, but when she was a student, she studied philosophy, and she was very involved in all sorts of causes and marched anti-nuclear marches and so on. We composed the problem in the late 1970s or early 80s, and everybody knew that she was at Berkeley. But the question that we ask is, which is more likely, that Linda is a bank teller, or that Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement? And you get a large majority of people in average universities saying that she is more likely to be a feminist bank teller than she is to be a bank teller. Now, that's an obvious mistake, because if she is a feminist bank teller, she is a bank teller. And she could also be a bank teller and not a feminist. So this is a mistake that people make. And I found that, I remember the shock of that. I remember posing that question and finding the answer. And I remember calling Amos Tversky. I was in Vancouver in Canada. He was at Stanford, and I called him right away with great excitement that, look, I mean, this is happening, as we say, within subject. That is, you can put the question directly and people will still make a mistake, although it's trivial. So
maybe not so trivial. I mean, it really does highlight biases in a tremendous way. Is there any way that your research has been used that disappoints you?
You know, there is no, I would say, neither disappoints me nor fills me with joy. I think, you know, it's in the culture, some of it, and some people claim to have been influenced by it, but you know, it was around and they took one part or another of it. I don't know of anything that's been exploited, in the sense that, you know, there's been a vicious marketing approach to marketing that builds on my work. I don't know of it. And nor do I know of things in which we have advanced the cause of humanity much.
Okay, so that's what I want to get into. You seem to insist this a lot, that you just want to enrich the vocabulary. And do you really think, maybe from a pessimist mindset, but do you really think people can't get beyond these biases? There aren't real ways of improving and moving forward?
Well, I think, of course, there are ways of improving and moving forward. I mean, in general, more educated people think better and make better judgments. The contribution of education is disappointing, but it certainly exists. When I think of moving forward, I'm much more optimistic about the possibilities of organizations to improve the way they think, than I am about individuals. For individuals, when you make a mistake, you're so busy making it that you don't have the spare capacity that you would need to observe that it's a mistake. It's rare. And I know it's rare because I've been studying the topic for a very long time, and I don't think my thinking has improved. So I'm not very optimistic about other people.
When I looked at through my emails originally to see where I had written and sent people articles of your work, I came across a speech that you'd given. I'm not sure if it was TED or somewhere else, where you mentioned this whole problem of people who move to Los Angeles. It probably would have been from London, but you didn't write it. And this idea, the way it ends, I think the ending has always taken me, and I don't know why it always occurs in my mind, where you say, look, basically Los Angeles, how important is weather anyway? It's not so important in your life. It's much, if I ask somebody, you know, where in your priority list does weather come in? It's definitely lower than health, family, love, etc., etc. So it's quite low. So why would you move somewhere just for the weather? Okay, but then you conclude and you say, but once they're in LA, if they ever question the decision, what will they do? They'll look back and remember the bad weather, and they'll be happy they moved to Los Angeles. So the question is, like, that seems to even everything out. Is that a fair point? Like,
no, I mean, you know, the point is irony. I mean, really, that's the point.
No, but
people
it works,
move
right?
because they think something will happen. It doesn't happen, but they think it did happen, and you know, so it's the kind of complexity that my mother would have enjoyed, and
Okay. Okay. Do you actually take shorter holidays?
uh,
Do you wait
no, I
for the
mean,
sunny day and leave?
I don't implement much of that. But what you cited,
You should become a rabbi.
there are a few sentences that I've made up that I'm really pleased with, and that was one of them. In the study in California, we had the formulation that nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. So just thinking about anything makes it look more important than it really is. And that's part of the human condition. You can't escape that. And that was, that, for example, was the kind of, uh, you know, coming up with that sentence, the kind of joy, of intellectual joy of, so.
You back to the education that you feel does improve somewhat. Is there a reverse effect? Are there mistakes that clever people make that that are more than people who are not educated or lower IQs?
Well, I mean, the main thing actually that is striking, I think, to me, is that high intelligence doesn't make people converge on shared beliefs. So, and in some cases, it goes the other way. That is, you present people with evidence, and the smarter they are, the more they distort it in the direction of their prior beliefs. So, intelligence really doesn't guarantee, and that's very disappointing, but intelligence doesn't guarantee convergence, doesn't guarantee agreement. Uh,
You could
and
almost imagine a reverse effect completely, where the more educated I am, the more sure I am of myself, which allows me to be more blind to my
there
bias.
is that, yes. I mean, the polarization effect is, some people have argued, is greater among educated and intelligent people.
Okay. Okay. So just to take this, you said about the Bible didn't influence you. What books have influenced you, and what's on your nightstand? What are the books that excited you most throughout your life and today?
Oh, I mean, in recent years, and what I'm going to say is not at all original, because my taste is shared by millions of people. But in recent years, clearly my favorite book was *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, and I had the pleasure of having a long Zoom conversation with him, a public conversation the other day. And yeah, uh, that's an example of a book that just leaves you with something. You feel that you've been enriched by it. My memory is so bad, and that I really find it difficult to trace influences. And also, this is something that is really part, I think, of possibly of the creative process, is that you don't know what influenced you, and it seems to come from your mind, whereas somebody else knows where it really came from, which is that you got a hint from someone, or you heard something, and you changed it, and then you think it's yours. And I've seen that happen when other people have taken my ideas, and I'm sure that many of my ideas, have the same origin, which I don't know.
Sorry, I was muted. That's very interesting. Do you feel that people are regressing or just not improving? Back to the optimism about humanity or anything?
No, I mean, I don't think that people are regressing at all. If anything, there is clearly some general improvement in people's conditions, and I think in the quality of education, so the trends have been described as positive trends. There are also major threats on the horizon, and like climate change, and I think artificial intelligence, are really major threats. And so whether we are improving at a rate that will be sufficient to meet the threats, that is where I am pessimistic.
Okay. Where do you see currently the advantage of humans over computers?
Oh, currently, I mean, I would say that in general, people have no advantage over computers if given the same information and the ability to. So once you put people and computers on, you equate the amount of information that's available and the amount of background information that's available. Computers always beat people. So, you know, and these days, they beat people by a lot. So that's true wherever you look. But in most situations, you cannot feed the computer the information that people have. And that's because computers don't know what they're talking about. They don't have common sense, and they cannot represent complex situations in the same way that the human mind can. Now, I think that will change within the next few decades, but at the moment, in the areas where they are on even ground, the computers are clear winners, and in the areas where thinking depends on common sense and on understanding how the world works, computers are not even in the game.
Okay. We only have 3 minutes to go. So I need to ask you a Jewish question. In Judaism, we're taught about the concept of kavanah, the idea of intention. And I'm religious, and therefore I was brought up this way. So it's very easy for me to do things by rote, automatic. And it's very important, though, for me to continuously slow down in life and try and think about what I'm doing continuously, which is obviously something you write about. I'd be interested, what are the most effective means you've seen that people can do this, can kind of overcome their bias for the completely automatic and be actually thoughtful and meditative to come to a deeper understanding of whatever they're going through or dealing with at that time?
I mean, clearly there is a big advantage, I think, in that context, to think slow and to be self-critical. And it's the capacity for self-criticism that will do the work if anything is to improve. But yeah, so I think that, and that is in part why I'm not optimistic that it will happen easily or that you can influence it a lot. I think slowing down in general is a good idea. Sleeping on it is a very good idea. Asking for advice is a very good idea, especially, I would add, asking for advice from people who like you, but you don't care how you feel, so that they'll be free to tell you things that you don't want to hear. So there are rules of acting that would, if followed, would enable you to act more wisely. And that I think is an optimistic way to end.
We have an entire day once a week where we slow down and try and do this. But often it's so harried and again by rote that it's not utilized for that purpose. We're going to have to end it here. Thank you so much, Danny. Beyond appreciative. You have been a wonderful guest and a most gracious guest, and thank you for accepting the invitation, or acquiescing as you called it. I deeply appreciate it. And I wish you long life and to continue your work, that you're still going strong at 87 is a blessing, not just to yourself, to the world. And as humble as you talk, you've definitely made a tremendous impact on my life and all of humanity. So to have work that really stands the test of time and inspires people positively, which I think it does, and it really does make people think. And people are optimistic about you and your work, clearly more than you are. So that's probably the best thing to be said.
I'm touched and embarrassed. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
If you email me to join up to any of our lecture series, we have a whole host of lectures coming up. So I'm sure Danny will join all of them. So you could have a great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.